Ted Cruz is beginning to throw Trump under the bus. We've seen this a lot recently with a lot of Republicans. They see the polls. They think it's inevitable that he loses. And I'm serious about that. Like Mitch McConnell's 100% convinced Trump is donezo. So here's Ted Cruz doing an interview with, I think his name is Jonathan Swan of Axios. This is interesting.
One issue I haven't heard discussed at all this election, let alone this debate, is the debt and deficit.
Yeah.
Mick Mulvaney had a great quote, and he said, you know, when there's a Democrat in the White House, my party, boy, do we care about the deficit's the worst thing in the world when Barack Obama's president. But Donald Trump came in and, you know, we're not so worried about that anymore. He's right, isn't he?
So, look, I'm very worried about the debt. And I'm worried about it under Trump. Now, to be fair, Trump didn't campaign on cutting the debt.
He did. He said he was going to eliminate the national debt in 8 years.
He also said something, I'm the king of debt in 2016.
Right.
Trump has said from day one, look, he gets to decide his priorities, and they're not necessarily all my priorities.
But here's the thing.
The fact that
I don't doubt your sincerity on this. You have been consistent. This is not directed at you. But stepping back, you belong to a party that has greenlit a historic expansion of deficits and debt. And it's just a plain fact.
Do I wish that it was a higher priority for the president to rein in spending and the debt? Yes. He didn't run principally on reining in spending and deficit and debt. That's not what he promised to do. We had real differences between it. And you know what? The voters made a decision.
I will remind you, he did promise to eliminate the national debt.
But let me give another element of it.
Yeah.
And this is where, in terms of how you eliminate the deficit and move towards reducing the debt,
you're going to say growth.
The most important factor. Trump's policies have been profoundly pro-growth.
Yeah.
The tax cut...
Also profoundly pro-deficit. Do you think your colleagues, the Republican Party, will rediscover its concern about debt and deficits?
Sure.
I mean, isn't that the most cynical, phony thing?
There's an element of it.
Doesn't that make you want to puke?
You're touching into something that, as you know, I have raged against. And I have raged against my own party not genuinely fighting to rein in spending and deficits and debt.
I mean, it's crazy watching him squirm, trying to weasel his way out of this obvious point. So Jonathan Swan's point is, whenever there's a Democratic president, you guys scream and bitch and moan, oh my God, the debt and the deficit, oh my God, it's so high, we must do something bankrupting our future generations. Oh my God. And then whenever Republicans are in control, they're like, debt? You say something about debt? I don't even know nothing about debt. What's debt even mean? I don't even know what you're saying when you say that right there. They're like, oh, we're just going to spend like a drunken sailor. Now, by the way, my position on it is, right now, you do not worry about the debt. The economy is imploding. We control our own currency. Every economist would tell you, except, hardcore anarcho-capitalists, like extreme libertarians, every non-Austrian economist will tell you, you have to spend when you're in a recession or a depression. You have to do it, or else you're going to have immense pain across the country. And we control our own currency. Of course, we can do it. So that's my position on it. But what are they spending on? Listen, the stuff they're wasting money on, a giant, colossal increase in military spending, which we don't need. That's what they're spending on. And also stuff like the CARES Act, where most of that bill, it's a $5 trillion giveaway to corporate America as a result of the pandemic. This is Naomi Klein's shock doctrine 101. Like, just give all the money to Wall Street, financial institutions, the airlines, big corporations. The economy implodes. You bail them out. Then they turn around and fire their workers anyway. When the whole idea was supposed to be, hey, we'll bail you out, but you got to keep your workers on. Well, they didn't make it the hardcore terms of the deal. And so they bail these people out. They bail these companies out. And then they fire the workers anyway. So this is what they're spending the money on. Corporate welfare and war. That's what they're spending the money on. And by the way, Ted Cruz, what else do they spend the money on? A colossal tax cut for the rich. So Ted Cruz, Jonathan Swan is wrong about one thing. He's like, oh yeah, you've been consistent on this. I'm not talking about you. No, he hasn't. He supported the Trump tax cut bill. 83% of that bill, 83% of the benefits went to the top 1%. And it added over $1 trillion to the deficit. They cut taxes for the rich. So they gave all this money to the rich and corporations because they cut the corporate tax rate too. And they added over $1 trillion to the deficit. He supported that. Rand Paul did too. These guys pretend like, oh yeah, I care so much about the debt and the deficit. And then they add over $1 trillion to the deficit to give more money to corporations and to billionaires and to the wealthy. So he's full of shit just like the rest of them. But yes, this is exactly what happens. Republicans are in control. They do whatever the hell they want. It adds to the debt and the deficit. And then as soon as a Democrat gets in control, like, oh my God, the debt and the deficit. Who's been spending this money? This is crazy. What are you guys thinking? What are you guys doing? This is wild. But notice, also, he ain't defending Trump. He's slowly but surely tiptoeing out of the room. He sees the polls. He knows what it looks like for Election Day. So he's like, yeah, see, the thing about Trump is with the debt. And listen, I disagree with them. He's a big spender. I say we should care about the debt and the deficit. I mean, what do you want me to tell you, man? We had different priorities. The voters picked who they picked. What are you going to do? See, you're going to see a lot of these, and I've already been seeing them, a lot of these little hints dropped here and there by other Republicans. That's like, we're not idiots. We see the polls. We know what's about to happen. So they're already trying to give themselves that wiggle room and that plausible deniability for a post-Trump era where they'll be like, who, me, bro? I was disagreeing with them all the time. I don't know what you're talking about. I would say things. I would call them in the middle of the night just to be like, I disagree with you, Donald. That's what I do. I don't think you're doing the right thing here, sir. Snakes, weasels. That's what they are. So easily. So anyway, you're beginning to see that happen. Oh, and also, I love when they say pro-growth policies. Like, yeah, we've had many pro-growth policies in the past 4 years. Oh, really? Have you seen what's happening with the economy? Now, admittedly, they'll say, yeah, COVID was the thing. Correct. But you don't get a mulligan. You don't get a mulligan. I love it when they do that. Would they give a Democrat a mulligan? So a Democrat, we get hit by the pandemic. People are dying. The economy tanks. People are losing their jobs. Would they say, it doesn't count because a bad thing led to it? No, they'd be like, deal with the current reality. What are you talking about? But for them, they just act like they skip a few chapters, as one of my friends said on Twitter. It's like they just skip the parts that make them look bad. Like, we were doing well about a year ago. What about now? Like, you're admitting not now. Okay, so there you have it. Anyway, it's funny watching him squirm. It's funny watching him slowly back away from Trump. And he's so full of it, man. He really is. He's so full of it. They only use the debt and the deficit concern to hit Democrats over the head. By the way, the real point is we want to make sure they don't spend more money for the people. So I don't want to spend money on healthcare. I don't want to spend money on education. I don't want to spend money on an infrastructure deal. So let's block the Democrats from spending on those things. And then what happens? If you don't spend on education, if you don't spend on healthcare, if you don't spend on an infrastructure deal or jobs or the people, well, then people don't like you because austerity hurts the population. So you see the trick when they're in power, spend, and don't say anything about the debt and the deficit, knowing that the more they spend, the more likely it is they'll do better in the next election. When Democrats get in power, oh my God, debt and deficit. They don't want them to spend a penny on the people because they know, listen, this is what happened with FDR. FDR was our social democratic president. He was so popular, he got elected 4 times. The Republicans had to come up with term limits to stop the Democrats from permanently winning elections. Because that's what happens when you spend on the people. They go, I kind of like this. This is nice. It's nice to have a job. It's nice to be secure. So this is their trick now. Their trick is if a Democrat gets power, debt deficit, oh my God, we just added trillions ourselves, but don't look at that, but care when it's them in power. So weaselly, such a prick. And of course, I couldn't get through the entire segment without doing my Ted Cruz impression. Why did I do the Pat Robertson shoulders for that? That's the Pat Robertson shoulders move. But my Ted Cruz impression, I'm Ted Cruz. I'm a cuck to Donald Trump, but if he loses, then I really disagreed with Mr. Trump. I warned him. I told him, don't do the things that you're doing, sir. I want to be president one day, but I'll probably be defeated by one of Trump's idiot sons. I'm Ted Cruz. Me.